Welcome back to the Brewbot development series. Last episode, we updated our Brewbot model and made some working animations. And today, I want to finally start on the combat system. But there were a couple of changes I made before moving forward with this. I switched over to the Jolt physics engine, which should be more predictable, and I also made it so that the player can step up over small ledges. Another thing I did was simplify the movement a little bit, because it feels like there's already so much going on with the controls as it is. And for a game that's supposed to be mainly focused on combat, having that much of the controls dedicated to platforming moves seems like a bad idea. So I scrapped the dive and slow fall moves. They might come back later, but I'd rather not worry about how those moves are going to interact with all the combat code. For now, I just want a more simple set of states and conditions to worry about. Now that that's all done, I'm going to put an empty 3D node on our Brewbot character. This way, I can attach a separate combat script to it and not have to mix the combat code with the movement code.
You gotta love that. Project starts with a warning.
So here's what I want to get done. I'm going to start with the basic punch. It's not quite going to do everything, it's not going to drop coffee beans yet, but I want a punch animation that happens when I press square and can't be spammed too fast. I want, on the combat component, some kind of a collision shaped 3D, some kind of a collision for where you can punch. If you're punching and they're in that collider, then I want it to send a signal to the target object. When I land a punch, print a line down here in the console basically, so that I know that I'm correctly sending a signal when I punch an enemy. And I mean, that's the basis of the combat right there. So here's the thing, let's say I do this move right here, the jab punch. I could basically just animate this collision box to do that. And then maybe for like AoE attacks, we could kind of have a separate collider. Someone suggested I set up like a proper rig and everything, so I can like control him better and not just do like individual bones. But I'm not all fancy like that, come on now. So let's make that punch animation. To figure out how long the animation should be, I did what all the professionals do and made punch noises in sync with the timeline. 20 frames? 30 frames looks right. And so the animationating began. I started by adding a body bone, which controls everything but Brewbot's limbs. This should let me make his animations a little springier. Then I started posing his second keyframe at a sort of wind-up pose. Then a third keyframe twisted forward and swinging. And the last keyframe returning to the same idle pose that's on keyframe 1. Now we've got a looping punch animation that looks good enough for me. So we can export the model, drag it in, and scream in horror. Okay, so that's not right. The first thing to suspect is the only thing that changed, which is the addition of the body bone. All I can think to do is replace the old Brewbot in our scene with the new imported one, which means swapping the script over to the new one and reorienting the model to share the same transforms. Now he's in one piece and playing animations just fine. So I made a combat script on that empty combat component node. All I want to do here is fire the punch animation from this separate node. That would be a great start. The only reason I'm not typing this code in the other script that has all of our movement stuff is because it would be a ridiculous mess to work with having everything all in one place like that. I got a reference to the animation player and made a function called basic punch, which is called whenever I press the punch input.
No crash yet. Crash.
Well hey, it works great as an exit game button, but let's fix that. So it looks like the current animation line I'm using to try and set a cooldown isn't typed right. And now when you punch, it doesn't do anything, which is actually an improvement. So what's going wrong now? Well, it turns out I was asking a double negative on our if statement, so it was basically asking the opposite of what I wanted. And now?
It'd be pretty cool if that worked just now.
I was able to print a line by pressing the button, so the function is being called, but the animation's not really working. That's when I remembered the idle animation playing over our walk animation before, and that's most likely what's happening now, which means I need a state in the movement script to prevent that. So I made a generic attacking state which can be reused on all attacks, and enabled it in the basic punch function over on the combat script. And now it should pull him out of the idle state when you punch.
I mean, yeah. Screw you. You definitely need to be able to do it while walking.
Cool.
I need to make this level look better. This prototype, this is like not acceptable.
So let's do that now, I guess. As much as I love trolling around a glitchy liminal cube space, I'm starting to grow tired of this stack of gray blocks. Let's at least make it a stack of textured blocks. Luckily, bringing textures into Godot and onto objects is as easy as dragging them in. I can even scale the UVs on the Godot material settings. That's better, but I think I can make it betterer. So I added a world environment node that uses that crappy skybox I made. Heck yeah, it even lights the scene and Brewbot in a more interesting way than the old single directional light setup that we were running with before. Now we can work on fixing our animation system. I'm considering renaming this series to the Brewbot Animation System Development Series, because this is ridiculous. But punching is not going to work with just an animation player and hard-coded animations that don't cooperate with each other. I need to be able to punch while walking and have the animation not affect his legs, so his legs keep walking but the rest of him punches, which is apparently just the kind of thing you use an animation tree for. An animation tree is supposed to be a more robust way of building your animation system. It lets you enable only certain bones for certain animations, and do things like smoothly blend between two different animations. I started off by experimenting a bit with a blend tree, but moved to a state machine. This isn't the same as the state machine we coded for our movement, but it is the same idea, just presented in a more visual layout, which is somehow more confusing and frustrating. What is happening? Get off of my mouse. So I get that you have different states connected by conditions, and that the logic runs through it like a river from one state to the next, but I didn't really understand how you get or set the conditions, or just how any of this turns into animations. So I just sat there and constructed this web of lies without knowing how to make it work at all. So I'm just gonna launch it just to see it crash. Okay, it didn't crash actually, but it did get rid of all of our animations. We saw a punch because it's in a different script. I'm assuming it's because the animation tree doesn't know what this is. So I found a tutorial that shows that apparently these condition boxes are where you establish a boolean that you can then set true or false in your code. And unfortunately, setting that boolean requires a bunch of ugly URL text to get the specific parameter. But at least it does make me T-pose in the floor. That was because I had the line shooting from start to idle set to enabled, which makes it not work. I'm sure that made sense to whoever made it that way. So now I am idle, but the thing is I'm not idling, just still idle. I want to be actively idle, not just double idled into being frozen like this. Turns out the animation wasn't playing because the animation tree wasn't part of our old Brewbot that we're using in this scene. So I replaced him, and now we're actively idle again. Yep, he's idle now. So technically nothing is unexpectedly wrong. Everything is working as I think it should. I'm now caught up, and there are no glitches right now. No glitches that I'm not aware of. Well, how would I know that? So now we've got to set up walking by setting its boolean true in the walk state. Let's see if walking works now. Does not. Also, he's actually falling. So it's not even playing idle though, right? It's playing falling. It's idle right now. You know what it's the thing? It's like shooting through the whole tree to falling. That's why I was trying to set the tree up. Because like it shoots to walk and then it shoots to falling because it has no expression. Now it should work more or less like I'm thinking it should. Yeah, I mean, that's better. This is that classic switching back and forth between two true conditions. So I've got to set idle to false while walking, and walking false while idle. Now we're back in order, and setting up the other animation states should be just the same. The landing animation gave me a good bit of problems though. I got it to work like it did before, but I'm gonna want to somehow blend it with the walk animation too. I knew I needed one of those blend trees we had earlier, which you can build inside of a state machine and use it like a regular state node, but getting this all sorted out in a way that makes sense is tricky. One thing we needed back was the speeding up of the walk animation as you move faster, so I started trying to figure out how to get a 0 to 1 number that represents your speed, and use that to set the timescale of the walk node. And it seemed like getting direction.length was just what I was looking for, so now we can just set our blend amount to this variable, and it works like it did before. Except the landing, which is something I've been ignoring so far. I went back into Blender and made the land animation more pronounced, that way I can tell if it did or didn't go off. And of course, it works fine when not moving too much, but it's not actually blending with the walk animation like I thought it was, it's really just canceling it. So I got that more or less fixed, and played around with the controls for about 0.25 seconds to find another glitch. But after enough ironing things out, we have a pretty decent animation system that's acting mostly normal. Although the state machine is a total mess, and the whole landing thing doesn't work great. And honestly, I don't feel like I've made things cleaner or easier or better after several hours of frustrating bug fixing and trying to understand this new system. Script. Why did I do this? Why did I do this whole project, this whole idea? It's like when things start coming together, I like this a lot. It's really whenever I take on a new thing I haven't done before in the engine or anywhere really. It could be Blender. It's one thing after another, and things don't get better. They just keep getting worse. Seems pretty hopeless that I'm ever going to get it together. I don't know. I'm not going to stop working on it suddenly because of the animation state machine is slightly annoying and confusing, and I'm making some negative progress, and Brewbot's doing whatever that is. I think I just needed to slow down and do some research before continuing, because after watching a really good tutorial, I felt like I knew enough to give the animation tree another try. The general change I'm making here is putting more actions together in a central blend tree node. And in that node, we can blend between idle and walking, we can fire a punch or land animation whenever, and just overall have better fluid interaction. This is sort of like our default node, that we can spring off into other states from. I wanted to blend between walking and falling too, so I got the player fall speed and clamped it from 1 to 10. Then I set that number divided by 10 to the animation blend, which kinda works but might need some tuning. So I set the clamp a little bit tighter so the blend happens faster. And you'll notice that landing while walking works pretty well now too. After watching that tutorial and putting most of my animations in a single blend tree, I feel like I actually have a grip on this system now. It mostly makes sense, and I'm getting things to work fairly quickly. The next thing I did was replace that timescale node on walking with a blend between walking and idle. So instead of just slowing down when you're barely moving, you actually take smaller steps that are blended closer to the idle pose. These animations really are an improvement now, and I don't hate working on them anymore. In fact, I was actually starting to get carried away. Let's look, what else can we do? Or is that the goal, for me to just keep making animation system better? No. The goal is for me to add combat. So let's do that. First of all, we do have one animation thing we need. Punch. Let's go to this animation tree. That's probably going to be in walk as a one-shot. And then if we have some walk happening, that's too much. There's never that much walk. Okay, so if I'm walking and I fire, look at that. Let's not do root motion. There we go. Maybe? It kind of snaps back too quick. So let's do some fade out time of like 0.1. Yeah. Boom. But now we should be able to call that one shot down here in basic punch. Equals 1. Let's try that. Yes. Okay, I need a cooldown. So I went ahead and put the punch on a cooldown using a timer function. And I turned Brewbot into his own scene, which is what someone had suggested before in a comment. This should make managing and updating him a lot easier. Okay, now we can actually, for real, finally start on the combat. I started by making our enemy. I made him out of a character 3D node. I thought about using a rigid body 3D, but that's probably going to lead to weird physics stuff happening when he interacts with the player. Then I attached a script to it that uses the movement template, which has gravity built in already. Then I went back over to the combat component script and got a reference to the punch collider. I'm going to have to figure out how to scan this box collider for an enemy during the basic punch function. But since the collider didn't have the right function, I tried referencing the area 3D, and now we have this get overlapping bodies option, which sounds exactly like what we're looking for. Let's print out the results and see what comes up. Well, it looks like I'm punching myself. So let's move this punch collider out away from our character a little bit. So now it's only returning text when I punch an object, in which case it returns some kind of a reference to the object. But I actually only want it to return this ID if I hit an enemy. I think these collision layers are the right thing to use here. I think it's kinda like changing to a different walkie-talkie channel. So now I have to figure out how to get the object with that ID and send code to it. Or at least that was my first way of thinking about this. Until I found this tutorial about signals, which are exactly what I need. Instead of getting the object with the ID, I'll just use the combat component to send a signal that only enemies are programmed to receive on their own script. Then, in that enemy script, I can connect the signal to a function, which plays when the signal is received. That's where the enemy can go through with the process of getting punched. But testing it out by trying to print the text "ouch" in the console, it doesn't seem to be receiving the signal, which was actually because I need a direct reference to the object that's sending the signal, which is the combat component in this case. Ah, it worked. Heck yeah. So now I could deliver damage, right? Let's say 10. I don't think this is gonna work, and this is gonna have issues. What? No, it doesn't. It's totally just delivered the 10 damage. What? I just accidentally stumbled on that. Printing the number 10 in the console is not much, but it's how I sent that data that's so exciting. What this means is, I can use this same signal to deliver and receive different amounts of damage, knockback, and really any other variable without actually making explicit variables for them. Boom. Crazy. Crazy. I have that set up and I kind of understand it and it's kind of simple. I like this. This is fun. This is a great change of pace. So, we successfully are punching a square, so we can make it like where he runs out of health, he dies. We might need to deliver more than just damage, because we also need to deliver knockback, right? So that certain attacks can hit harder, knock back further. I don't know if you can take two numbers in on a function, can you? Like if I did another, can I do another knockback in? Yeah, it's okay with that. So now we'll print health points, knockback. Let's go back to combat. In the signal, we'll send another knockback. And then we'll send it with 10 and 1, maybe? And on test enemy, on test enemy, we'll make sure it's afloat, and we'll see how it goes. Yes, it works. So now, the way I have it set up, I don't have to have the variable itself explicitly contain a set value and then make a bunch of variables. I get to send those variables in the signal and have it react accordingly to the signal that was sent. The next thing I want to do is have the cube get deleted when it reaches 0 health. So I looked around online and found that there is a Q-free function which effectively deletes the object. Now, after decrementing 10 from its 30 health 3 times, the cube disappears. Let's try to deliver some knockback. To make sure the cube gets sent in the right direction, I got a reference to the player direction and added that to velocity, multiplied by however much knockback I send in the attack signal. But of course, this didn't just work right out the gate. It took quite a bit of experimentation. Just like with the dive ability, working with these vectors and velocities can be really confusing. Oh, it might be working now. Yes! Now we need to lower this number. What does 2 look like? I think I want more reach on the punch, which is luckily very easy to fix. All I have to do is grab this, give it more reach. That might be too OP. Okay, wait. When I click, it fires the signal once. So if I start swinging and then walk forward, it won't count. It punches for 1 frame. So if he's not in the box in the 1 frame that I click, then it's not going to hit him. If I'm facing away and I click and then turn to him, it doesn't work, but it really should. These are the kinds of features that you didn't even realize were features, but are absolutely necessary. I struggled for a bit to wrap my brain around a decent solution for this, because I need the box to scan for enemies for a duration, but only send the signal once if it detects an enemy, not once per frame. I ended up making a hit lock boolean, which locks it from sending more signals after one is sent, which ended up working pretty great. Let's go ahead and put him out in the open and try to figure out some super basic AI. I made an Area 3D node with a sphere collider to act as a detection radius, and I set it to scan for layer 3, which I'm only going to have Brewbot on. Then I copied the state machine from our movement script over to our enemy cube script. This is not going to be as intricate though, he only needs 2 states, idle and attacking. Then I can make an if statement on the idle state, which basically just tells him to slow down to a halt. It's just the deceleration bit from the default movement script. And I need another statement on the attacking state that somehow moves him towards you. Then I can set the states by scanning the aggro radius for the player. If it finds the player, it's attacking. Otherwise, it's idle.
He should go near me now if I get near him. Where's he going? Okay, so something's wrong.
I think this really goes to show that I still have no idea how to use the script to make things move. I tried using lerp or linear interpolate, which gradually slides from one value to the next, which worked, but not so gradually. So I nerfed his movement speed a little bit, and I think this is pretty much what I wanted. He even stops chasing you if you leave the bubble, but everything goes wrong when you punch him. He drifts away for a second and then gets an offset and can no longer follow you properly. I couldn't quite find this specific case online, so I figured I'd try asking ChatGPT and just see what it gave me. And it printed out a whole freaking walkthrough on each and every mistake I've ever made in my entire life. But in there was some good stuff about not using lerp for this specific situation, since it doesn't mix well with other velocity changes. So I made a few of the changes that it suggested, replacing lerp with a more direct method, establishing some new variables, and using those variables in some new statements. All of this to basically pause his movement when he gets punched, to let him feel the knockback, and then resume chasing when the knockback is over. And testing it out, that's exactly what doesn't happen. So I turned this weird knockback velocity variable into just normal velocity, and now it works correctly. Even though it did require some modifications, ChatGPT's suggestions were actually really helpful. And it gave me so much, I don't think I'll really need to ask it anything else. I think this has pretty much got everything I need for GD script. I also set up a line that uses the look at function to keep the enemy facing the player.
Yes, look at that. Stay away. What's he gonna do over here? He's climbing. He's trying to climb. And it's kind of working.
Now I want to make some kind of visual feedback. Let's make him flash red whenever you hit him. I went ahead and gave the cube a material and an animation player, and clicked around until I found a way to make a new animation and keyframe the material color. This is the first time I've made an animation in Godot, but it does seem to work. So now we can try and play it in the take damage function and see what happens.
Is that gonna work? Oh my gosh. That is so awesome.
The next thing I want to do is make a death animation, where the cube shrinks down and then deletes when it's done. So I'll try playing that shrink animation when your health gets to 0, and then only delete itself when the current animation isn't still on shrink, which gives us this, because it's never actually leaving the shrink animation. I think the easiest solution here is to just use a timer. I even found a function for the animation player that gets the length of the current animation that it's playing, and I can use that directly as the length of the timer. And now you can officially fight a cube. Granted, they can't fight you, but one defenseless cube is too easy. Let's throw a whole crowd of these things in and see what happens. Okay, so they do follow me, but they also all get punched at the same time, which is either some kind of instancing thing or the signal not being clear enough. I went ahead and made it so that when you punch an object, it also sends the ID of the punched object, which is something I meant to do earlier but kind of forgot about. I'll just send the first 2 members of the array and check if the enemy is either of those, but that does mean you'll only be able to hit 2 enemies at once. In testing it out, the flashing does still go off universally, but the enemies don't all get killed at the same time. Maybe it's the animation or the material or something. At this point, I knew that I had fixed something by making the signal clearer, but I knew that there was also something going wrong with the animation or maybe the material. And after looking online, I found that there's a checkbox to make the material local to the scene, so that way the animation won't change the root material that they all use, but instead each individual instance of that material. And that did the trick. Having this set up is a really good feeling. Adding new features and attacks should be pretty simple with how it's all set up, but we have a couple more issues to fix, like all of the cubes just clipping into each other. So I turned on Collision Mask 2, and that seemed to work. Now, they not only show up on layer 2, but also affect other things on layer 2, like each other. That's when I also realized there is a way I can make more than 2 enemies be hit at once.
Wait, all I have to do to make more than just 2 enemies be able to be hit is in combat, instead of sending ID and ID2, targets. And then all I have to send is the whole punched list. And then on enemy, I just have to check punched array if punched dot has self. Yeah.
Well, that's gonna do it for this episode. These changes have me really excited. There's just so much we can do with this combat system. I think next week I'm gonna do something outside of this series, but after that, I wanna start uploading these episodes weekly. They'll be a little bit shorter, but more frequent. I'm thinking something like 15 minutes. Video length, not upload frequency. Maybe someday we'll have 15-minute uploads. Anyways, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.